be doing that. And yet I've read reasons why it's, well, they're not things that represent God. But boy, if you're a literalist, it says here, no.
And so
I've had problems. I've had problems with this what Vic just read. I've always had problems with this.
I have those same problems, Yehuda. I
Yeah.
have beautiful artwork from Nepal and Tibet and different places, but of course they're idolatrous images on them. I don't have them up on my walls because of that. Yet I wouldn't worship anything on them. If I did have them hanging on my walls, they would just be art. But I don't, and I feel like I deprive myself because of that. I deprive myself of beautiful collections that I have of Buddhist art and Tibetan art and things like that. So I totally get it.
But I really think the question in my mind is, where did these restrictions or this decision that carries over from having an image that you're worshiping to just having an image?
Correct.
Because some of in doing some of the art research, looking at some of the excavations that have been done of the very earliest synagogues in the area around Israel, you find that there are mosaics that depict people and events and animals, the sorts of things that we were told. I mean, I remember being told growing up that you could have a stained glass window, but it couldn't show a complete person because that would violate this prohibition. And it doesn't seem that it's always been that case. There seems to
Well,
have been.
maybe that was considered idolatrous too, and they did it. I mean, because we also have in the Torah where Israel has fallen and they have worshipped idols and, or not worshipped idols, but had idols. And it's very, I don't know, it's unclear
I'm
to me.
I'm usually such a perfectionist stickler, and I'm got you guys are being oversensitive. Maybe Rabbi Daniel. I'm always having to go back to our one ordained person here. Sorry, Daniel, but it's ornamentation. I just thought back of the whole description of all the artisans for the art for the ark. There's
Mhm.
nothing that said you can't have ornamentation. We're supposed to enjoy the beauty of the world. That's why God created the heavens and the earth and created these physical places so that we could marvel at these things. We're not supposed to not enjoy that. All these prescriptions against it that you're getting, I think, we've inherited from rabbis over the years, especially probably, after the temple's destroyed. All this, I think, comes a lot after the temple was destroyed, and we don't have these the traditions that directly evolved out of the actual words we've just read. And so we go to these other forms of trying to prove that we're following the laws. What do you think,
But
Yehuda?
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
No, it says you shall not have images or likenesses of anything in heaven, earth, or water to be worshipped.
to be worshipped. Yes.
Bingo, bingo. It's okay. That's the part. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, Danny, and then you.
There is a teaching that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination towards idolatry, was overcome by the rabbis, and it's no longer. In other words, at the time of the Torah, and even if we date Devarim to the 6th century, no, 7th century BC, around the time of Jeremiah, there was still temptations. They were surrounded by idolatry. That was what all the other religions were. But eventually, that the monotheism became. And by the way, monotheism was a tough sell in that environment because it just said if no one's seen God, our God's visible, your God's invisible. What's that about? So at any rate, and by the way, early Christianity obviously took advantage of that. But so the idea was that it's um, not that kind of temptation anymore by the time we get to the Talmudic era. But again, how literally this was taken. Alan's probably thinking of the synagogue in Dura Europos, where they're not just, I mean, and some of the mosaics found in the Galilee, there's a zodiac and Apollo's in the middle of it, this chariot. I mean, so it varied depending on where and when you are and how strict everybody wanted to be. But so I mean, I don't think and you're not in any peril of worshiping all these beautiful works of art. Um, so that's what I would say about that.
And yet, when you go into the home of a Hasid, I've had this experience where you look and see the walls are bare except for a portrait of the Rebbe,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Lubavitcher Rebbe.
That's
Yeah.
idolatry.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
it just feels like it.
Yeah.
Just
I
say that.
agree.
It does kind of I think to pick up on what Ruth Ellen was saying. I think that maybe there was some effort at some point to say, why did all these things happen? What did we do wrong? And you go through the checklist and say, oh, we had paintings on the wall. Okay, maybe that's it. Stop doing that and we won't get punished again.
Yehuda?
Maybe this is just an example of, by not knowing exactly what the text means, of building a wall around it to make that the rabbis made sure that we weren't going to violate anything by making the rule bigger than it might appear to be. And yet we know that, art was driven by all the religious approaches anywhere in the world. That drove the art. So when it's,
Yeah.
it seems counterintuitive, the whole thing.
Go ahead, Ruth Ellen.
Yeah, well, to all these points, and especially to Rabbi, what Daniel was saying about all this temptation around. I have a problem with this too. I mean, my father was the biggest prude in the world. We can talk about modern times and whatever. Anything, and we're saying this very generally, notions of pornography, anything that pretty much all of even civil or theoretical society can say, it could go too far. It's a literal slippery slope, It's ridiculous just to say, oh, you think that you're blaspheming because you may put a picture of a beautiful butterfly on your wall. That's ridiculous, right? And then the farther and farther you go, so the more things you let slip up. And then as a whole society, because people aren't discerning, that's the whole thing. They're not discerning and they're not paying attention, like Moshe is imploring them to pay attention. So it gets to be, well, in order to keep the worst case scenario from happening, we have to cut it off with zero tolerance kind of thing. I mean, I see that happening in modern times. I'm the old fart now, looking at stuff on TV or what's appropriate or what crosses the line. It's not, because in secular society, it's really going back to Sodom and Gomorrah in a lot of ways. The focus on everything being hypersexual and all the kind of things that zealots and extremists in every religious tradition are manifestly trying to stop society from doing, and they're trying to impose it on the will of everybody. I'm bringing this into modern times because I think it hits us in modern times. That's the whole point. A lot of the more liberal people are saying, this is ridiculous. Of course, we don't believe in child pornography, for example. Of course, we don't believe in this, that, and the other thing. But at what point do you fall over that slope and you can't climb yourself back up? That's what happens. And if you watch how mores have changed over a century, then there is a backlash to the Victorian way of looking at things, for example. And that's maybe part of the whole cyclical nature of life, because when people say this is ridiculous, we shouldn't be so stringent as a society and give individuals more room, and then they take and you give them an inch and they take a yard, and then all of a sudden he says this has got to stop, and so they pull it back altogether, and then that starts the cycle all over again. I'm not saying there's an answer to it, but I think in some ways, this speaks to that from the more ancient times, because it goes back to human nature. Whether it's the evil inclination to talk or to satisfy their carnal urges, for example, even what just happened 2 parshas ago. So I don't know what we can do about it. It's human nature. When the human nature changes, then we'll have the Mashiach, right? When that's going to happen, I don't know.
Okay, so I think there's, I'm summarizing a lot of what everyone has said to say that this seems to me more like an admonishment against the looking for simplicity, our need to have binaries so we can stick to something and not feel wishy-washy. I think that's an element in this because, there's it feels like a give and take all the time. It is because of a different, I think it's in the Parashat Vayakhel or somewhere right around there, the idea of from the people, gather all the people and build a temple and then, all the different artisans that it takes to make all the different things that are spelled out by the inches and whatever, that it's that community thing. But for one person or one segment of a population to take something and make it, put the mantle of God onto themselves so that they pretend to be God. That's the thing that I'm seeing. It's not a prohibition, it's a caution. And again, it's cautioning to me, the caution of the looking at life in binaries is very, very dangerous because it takes all of the range of all of humanity and all the different ways that we can understand things and all the ways that that is okay. Because if we understand the one important thing is, and that's in line 26 here, it says, Ha'idoti v'chem hayom. I have a translation here. Okay, thank you. I call heaven and earth this day to witness against you that you shall soon perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. Okay, you shall no longer endure it. It shall be utterly wiped out. What the purpose of the allness of this all is to go to, for humanity to arrive at a place with the tools to sustain humanity, to sustain society. And if any one of the elements along the way takes on too much, and the great thing that I'm seeing, the great admonition is, don't pretend you're God. If you pretend you're God, bad things will happen. But what is that pretending you're God? It's all these little clues along the way. It's like, you are humans. You are endowed in the image of, but you're humans. And that takes, it takes the responsibility away from saying, well, we're just here. Whatever bad things happen, God must have done it. It takes that relationship and just says, I have endowed you. And so it makes the relationship both ways. Humans need God, but God needs humans. It's a relationship. It's always a relationship. A covenant is a relationship. And it's not like, okay, I got it. Thanks. I'm putting you over here. I got it now. I know what to do. That reminder constantly is, it still comes from somewhere. And that's not the right word. I don't know what word I'm looking for. It's not admonishment. It's not prohibition. It's somewhere in between.
You made me think of the term of the two-way street, the covenant is a two-way street. But I was also thinking back even to Rabbi Pressman's analogy about it, that the captive in the car literally going to school, because at this point, that brings it to what you said about from now on, it's going to happen, and you're going to be responsible for it happening. And all these other books were saying, when you get to the land that I am showing you, that I'm giving you, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And they were still, yeah, and that's part of human nature too. You listen to it and you go, yeah, okay, I get that. That makes sense. We will follow you, Hashem. And then when push comes to shove, and you actually gotta, put your what's that other aphorism? Put your words to into action. That then you go, oh, wait a minute, this is a lot harder than
I think Craig, you have your hand. Craig has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, if God put a prohibition on Jewish people creating art, wow, did we fail him? Because the Jews have been so accomplished in art and creating images, etc. And I see you shaking your head, Abiba, and that's good. Among the most intriguing discussions we've had here is about what is meant by us being the chosen people. And I think we concluded that it was the fact that we received the law. Moses was a Jew, he received the law, passed it on to us. But here in the last section we read, it didn't say chosen people, didn't it say, you are my very own people? Like we are special, we are the children of God, we are his own people. And I don't know what to do with that because it does give rise to claims. Well, what are you talking about? Some form of superiority, Jewish superiority, something like that. If we are God's very own people, you can see how other people would say, wow, what about us?
So I'm gonna defer anything I want to say because I want to hear Arnie first, but this is a crux of this. I will spend the rest of my life trying to explain what you just said. I'll never get it right, but I'll keep trying because I have a sense, but I don't have the words for it. So Arnie, I want to hear what you have to say.
You were talking about it's something between a caution and a prohibition. And I was thinking maybe a guideline or a guardrail. I know like I for a while was Orthodox and they start Shabbat early just to make sure that they don't violate Shabbat.
Yeah, that's building that fence around.
Yes.
That's the same principle.
So Alan, go ahead.
Is there maybe an escape clause in this that there is the part of it that says if when you get to the land that you've been promised, these things must be done or must not be done, but we've been spread out to everywhere else. So does that mean it's okay to do art other places?
I just want to clarify if anyone understood that I believe that there's a prohibition against art, I'm saying absolutely not. I think the prohibition is against using art in idolatrous ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about creating art. The creating art is actually something that is described as a quality of making the completeness of a community. Like for a community to work and for everyone to have a place in society, artists are a very important part. So there's no way that I understand, and I apologize if you understood that I'm thinking that there is a correct thing in the prohibition against creating art. The prohibition is not against creating it, it's against worshiping it. And again, it's that thing about the as humans, we tend to love the idea of one thing or another. Binaryism makes things kind of understood. You can draw a line, you say, well, this one belongs here and this one belongs there, and I'm good now. I don't have to spend the rest of my life wondering about it. But I think that defeats the purpose because spending the rest of your life wondering about it is the purpose. And so as it pertains to the land, okay, what is this land? Standing on the other side of the Jordan River, gazing across this beautiful land where everything, once you get to cross over, everything will be ideal and perfect. There's nothing in the writing that describes that. There's already there's been this wording, but there will be in what we call the fifth commandment coming up. The why of it all is that so you may flourish and continue to be alive in the land that I have promised to your ancestors and to you, right? So there's this idea that all these things along the way and all the rules and all these things that feel kind of like, what? Where did this come from? Where did this come from? They are just guidelines so that when people live in a society, they don't kill each other, basically. And whatever way they say, I'm doing it because God told me. See that picture? That God told me to do something unthinkable. that disconnecting between humanity and understanding of the relationship with God is very dangerous. It's dangerous both ways. You know, a wrathful God has in our storyline destroyed all of humanity more than once, or caused such great dispersion and heartache that it was hard to recover from. But that same relationship, when you turn it the other way, says that humans are always in the relationship. And if they forget that and they think they act like gods, only destruction will follow. Yuda, speak.
You know, for some reason, the whole concept of Murism comes into this with me, with appreciation of the appreciation of art, where Murism is this continuum with not an obvious beginning or end, but we sometimes use it that way. But with art, it's like art can be with you when you're living in an environment, but then via Murism, you can fall more and more in love with the art, in effect, and it can become that much more important to your life as time continues to go on. And I mean, it's sort of weird. I mean, you know, I feel like other people might do the same thing too, but you know, we live with art in our house, and I stop and tour our art. I don't just leave it there in the background. We have this art in the house. I will go and pick up a sculpture and just look at it for a while. You know, so therefore I've made this transition from it being, it's the Murist transition from being the continuum of not having that much importance assigned to it to having much more importance assigned to it.
The word is merism, just to be
Sorry,
clear, and I'm putting the definition.
Merism. Love
Young
the
and old, like young and old, were there,
Yeah,
right.
there.
including
I
the
put my
middle.
definition that I looked up a long time ago when I
And it's a
understood that there was a
Torah.
word.
It's a Torah study word
Yeah.
in this group.
Well,
Impress
okay,
your, impress your friends.
Yes, of course.
so merism is the opposite of binaryism. Because in its essence, it is two words, two concepts that seem extreme, but they do include everything in the middle. So I consider it the opposite of binaryism. And in Hebrew, okay, look at that line I just quoted. Heaven and earth, the original merism.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's not included in there?
No, do you also understand how art can sort of be that same thing too?
Because it can mean one thing to me and a complete opposite to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I want to keep reading. I also want to speak less. Somebody can remind me to speak less. That would be okay. I wouldn't be offended.
That doesn't apply to everybody, because if I do it, I get in trouble.
Actually,
Yeah,
anybody but you. Yeah,
I
that's
should
okay.
try to speak less also. So
It's hard, Danny, when we keep calling on you.
well, that's different. I mean, but even so.
Yeah. All right. Who wants to read?
Well,
We read
I
31.
turned
So
on just to say,
yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just going to say, first of all, we pride ourselves on having no shoulds around here. That's the thing about our Torah study, which again, it really means a lot to me, Rabbi Pressman, that you said over and over how impressed you are with the level and that you keep coming back. I just want to thank you again. I'm proud of all of us, to tell you the truth. And maybe we're a little spoiled because I think we've got a very thought-provoking, thoughtful group here. So there's no
I'm
too much
here.
or too little. Okay, that's my editorial. For your God, Adonai, is a compassionate God who will not fail you nor let you perish. God will not forget the covenant made on oath with your fathers. You have but to inquire about bygone ages that came before you, ever since God created humankind on earth, from one end of heaven to the other. Has anything as grand as this ever happened, or has it ever been like, or has its like ever been known? Has any people heard the voice of a God speaking out of a fire as you have and survived? Or has any deity ventured to go and take one nation from the midst of another by prodigious acts, by signs and portents, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and awesome power, as your God Ononoi did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? You have been shown to know that Adonai alone is God. There is no one else. From the heavens, God let you hear the divine voice to discipline you. On earth, God let you see the great divine fire, and from amidst that fire you heard God's words. And having loved your ancestors, God chose their heirs after them. God personally, in great divine might, led you out of Egypt to drive from your path nations greater and more populous than you, to take you into their land and assign it to you as a heritage, as is still the case. Know therefore this day and keep in mind that Adonai alone is God in heaven above and on earth below. There is no other. Observe God's laws and commandments, which I enjoin upon you this day, that it may go well with you and your children after you, and you may long remain in the land that your God Adonai is assigning to you for all time. Whoosh. Then
Yeah.
Moshe set aside three. You want to stop or no?
No, just
who
read.
said
It's a
so?
little intermediate 3 lines. Just read them.
Sure, I heard. Then Moshe set aside 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan, to which a man who has killed someone could escape. One who unwittingly slew another without having been an enemy in the past, he could flee to one of these cities and live. Bezer in the wilderness in the tablelands, belonging to the Reubenites. Ramoth in Gilead, belonging to the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan, belonging to the Manassites.
Okay. Because from there on, we're going to read a big chunk that's include the second reading of the Decalogue. So, and Craig, I will admit, reading these lines and just stopping right there does show me the legitimacy that some people are looking for to say, see, all of this just for me. The nationalists in Israel right now can look at this and say, it says it right there. All of this line, all of it, just for us. But what is the purpose of the land? What is the purpose of a promised land? That's the crux of the issue. Is it just, you got yours, just keep everybody out and you're good for the rest of time? Just all you got to do is keep everybody out, all your enemies, all those ones who want to kill you, all those, because you can stop right there and make that case. I can see how you can do that. But putting it back into the context, there is no, how good is that life? Like what is satisfying about it? What about it causes you to keep growing? Absolutely nothing. It is a tiny piece of land. So if you think all for me and just for me, I'll keep my enemies out and then I'm good. Sitting on my tuffet, everything is good. Well, I mean, on that tiny piece of land, eventually there won't be enough land to sustain the amount of people who think just for me. There's a lack of reality there. So therefore, I have to look at it in a greater picture. And that greater picture, that's, the rest of this book. Because the chosenness is not about getting your own tuffet to sit on. It's about showing that the relationship to the covenant is what allows all the rest, the flourishing, the art, all of the rest. And that's for all people. The Israelites were not chosen to be given that exclusively. They were chosen to, in my mind, to show what it means to have that relationship and that freedom. And that is what you get from that is an ability to flourish. Arnie.
I wish I could find it, but my husband sent me a video one time that showed that all these different peoples claimed the same land was given to them by God, not just the children of Israel. And so you got to say, well, what's the difference? The difference is there's a covenant there.
The children of Abraham.
And just like we say in the Shema, there's a covenant that you are to obey the laws.
And who do the laws include? Just you and yours?
There are 2 sets of laws. there's a universal law that applies to all humanity. And then there's the Torah that applies only to those who choose to accept it.
And are you responsible only to you and your family and the ones who look like you? I mean, there's a phrase that is repeated so often in the Torah, we can't just say, oh, it's coincidence. And that refers to the stranger among you and all those without agency. They have to be taken together. If you start to separate and say, well, I don't like that word, I'm going to take that out, what are you left with? That's when you're left with picking and choosing, picking and choosing for your own benefit, and that is idolatry. That's how I see it. Danny.
So the answer or the corrective or the full meaning is found in the book of Amos, chapter 3, verse 2. You alone have I singled out of all the families of the earth. The Hebrews, Rak etchem yadati, have I known. That is why I will call you to account for all your iniquities. Uh-oh.
All. That's a pretty big word.
Kol avonotechem.
Yeah, that's what my grandmother said. I've chosen you for Tsuris.
Well, it's covenant. That's why I prefer saying covenant people to chosen people. And and later on, Amos is an incredible book to study because it's one of the shorter prophetic books, but it's got so much in them. And later on in the book, I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to scroll down, but God said, yeah, I took you out of Egypt, but I also took these other people. I also helped these other peoples. So, don't be too full of yourself. So the current band of criminals wearing kippot in Israel, their understanding of Jewish nationalism completely ignores the whole prophetic corrective, I would say.
Absolutely true.
Mm-hmm. Ruth Ellen, go ahead, but you have to unmute.
My touch screen is like
all right, just
I didn't even touch the screen and it took the video off. I just put my thumb over it. Again, this is why it's so hard, and especially in modern times. And I think thinking back when the people were listening to this at a time when all the cultures were trying to understand why the sun was up there in the daytime and seemed to disappear, at night, and all these things, and where did we come from, and who made us, and all this, and it was in a more simplistic way. And the bottom line is how we live through the ages like this, and that we are the people of the book, not of a place, is we're getting into all this trouble in terms of the land and who has the right to it, because we're focusing on the physical and not the ephemeral. And here it is again, this whole thing about Hashem saying, you heard me, you saw the fire, you did not see me. You don't want to make the mistake of trying to imagine in your head what I should look like. You're going to take me in your image instead of the other way around. And that dichotomy with having to live in the present, in the physical world on this earth and get along with each other and thrive. And of course, when you thrive, you want to try to find a reason why. How come we were among the people that had plenty and the other ones had famine? To the point of how good is this land? Hashem gave them this land because supposedly it was good land. And if they follow his prescriptions, they're going to have enough for everything, and they're going to have plenty enough to share with those who need it, the stranger and the forlorn and the widow and so on and so forth. And then on top of that, you look at the whole idea that nothing stays the same, and the earth we're talking about now isn't the same. And we talk about this all the time. Now they're saying, what did Israel create out of the desert? It's a technological marvel. Well, where is this land of milk and honey? There are places like that, but at the time of the Bible, didn't it now what we know about genealogy, not genealogy, geology, and the notion that the Earth may well be more than 5,600 years old, looking at it on these different planes, we're not even talking about the same land because mountains and rivers and lakes and everything has shifted and changed. I'm thinking again how they're saying that the Nile might have shifted, which is why the pyramids could, probably they took all these stones up the Nile because its route has changed and things like that. I'm sorry, I'm flowing all over the place. But what gets us in trouble is focusing on our physical needs and trying to create some sense of, yes, I'm safe now. This is my spot. Leave me alone. When nothing is ever going to stay the same and nobody is going to live forever. And that's where we get stuck. But if we follow these prescriptions from Hashem, we're not going to have time to think about all these things that make us fearful and jealous and greedy and blah, blah, blah. And we would find that we have a sufficiency while we're here on earth. But, I don't think enough people look at the world that way. And so here we are where we are, and people fighting over this tiny little spit of land.
Alan?
I had something else I wanted to say, but I'm trying to remember the name. There was a comedian once who commented on the chosen people and being given the promised land, the one piece of land in the Middle East that has no oil under it. That's where I wanted to go, was just the idea that, well, where did it just went out? Hang on a second. That it's a matter of faith, that the only documentation we have is in the Torah. And I can imagine, let's take it into court. When you buy a house, they do this exhaustive search back through time immemorial to find the ownership of the house, to make sure that it's legal for the person who is selling you the house to do it because they have a legal right to it. And you go through this whole title search project. Well, what do we have? We have the words that are in the Torah, and you take that into court, and I can just hear the attorney say, hearsay. We don't. I object. Because we don't have a signed document, and we don't have God coming into court to testify under oath, which would be an interesting sort of circular issue. But just the idea that we accept this as a matter of faith, that we can't necessarily look back to these documents to justify it.
I'm very glad you brought up that example of a title search, because here's a prime example of what it means for humans to claim for themselves greater understandings that do not belong. Here we are in Hawaii, right? Most of us. If you went back to the title on this house, who lived here and benefited from the land and sustained the land was before the idea of claiming title to land. So where do you start to count history? From the time that we created this registry? Because before we were here, there were people raising families from what the land could give. Because ownership is a construct. The ownership of land is a construct. And if you brought this up to the court before courts, the case is pretty weak for me living in this beautiful house, while Native Hawaiians live crowded in other places. So it's a pretty weak case, I think, legally. But our legal system starts from a place of, not from a place of a relationship and a covenant, but from a place of colonialism. So interesting. That's a very interesting thing you just brought up. I know you can expand that. We can say this about other parts of the world that we try not to directly talk about on Shabbat because, we see where that devolves into, but expand that. It's not a hard reach. Where do you, and that's the idea of the promised land always being in front of you. It's never behind you. That promised land is not just a physical place, as we've all said, okay? It is an idea of, if you want life to go on and you want a place for your children and grandchildren in perpetuity, there are some things that as humans you must do. And it's never in the looking backwards. And that's the hard one to swallow. We want to pick and choose. We want to say, oh, in this instance, in this current conflict in the world, there's a rightness to give back something, but not us here in Hawaii. We don't want to give back. I don't want to give back my house. I want other people to give back something. The answer is never in going backwards. You don't correct the wrongs of today by going into the past. You take all your accumulated human knowledge to hold you upright as you move forward. Because the idea is not like me or them. Either I occupy this house or some ancient Hawaiian family. There's no shortage of goodness in the world for all. The claiming of the, I get it at your expense, that just creates conflict. That's the promised land idea. Do not be fooled. Do not be fooled by the simplicity. There is no simplicity. Sorry, it's not part of what's offered. I think, Ruth Ellen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, I mean, you brought up my famous little example that I always try to give when any conflict in the world, whether it was Serbia or this, that, or the other thing, I say, okay, you try to have a rational court judgment decide what individual or group of individuals has right to possession of this certain particular land. I said, throw a dart on a map and ask who has the righteous claim to this. And I said, but you're leaving out one thing. When was that map? Time, the fourth dimension, when, depending on where in time you look. So we can go backwards. I mean, this is the evil inclinations of human beings. And the thing that I have the hardest time dealing with is because when, again, the whole idea of the temporalness of and the limited time, non-immortal way that we live on earth now, what we can't get back, no matter how much money, you can't put time in a bank. You can accumulate gold or whatever people supposedly value as worthy, but you can't take, so we look around and like you said, you can't find the answer by looking back. On the other hand, if we are going to be careful of the stranger and live moral, just lives, we're going to recognize sometimes when mitigation is required. And that's what because people have a short-term viewpoint, they can barely look beyond their own lifetimes, which is hard enough. So they'll look for we have to protect our great grandchildren or great great grandchildren, and they'll only look that far. And even then, it's like accumulate for mine, me, my people, and forget about everybody else. And that's ultimately not sustainable, but I'm not sure. And it's good old James Baldwin, the fire next time, maybe not a flood, but I mean, and we'll be doing it to ourselves if global warming is the fire next time. Might have to clear the herd and thin the herd and start all over again.
I want to keep reading. Whoever unmutes first and starts to read gets to read.
All right, I'll do it.
Okay.
Wait, let me put my glasses on. I can't find them. Uh-oh. All right, this is the teaching that Moses set before the Israelites. These are the decrees, laws, and rules that Moses addressed to the people of Israel after they had left Egypt, beyond the Jordan, in the valley at Bet Peor, in the land of King Sihon of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, whom Moses and the Israelites defeated after they had left Egypt. And they had taken possession of his country and that of King Og of Bashan, the two kings of the Amorites, which were on the east side of the Jordan. From Arar, on the banks of the Wadi Aman, as far as Mount Sion, that is Hermon. Also the whole Arabah on the east side of the Jordan, as far as the Sea of Arabah, at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. And Moses summoned all the Israelites and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the laws and rules that I proclaim to you this day. Study them and observe them faithfully. Our God Adonai made a covenant with us at Horeb. It was not with our ancestors that Adonai made this covenant, but with us, the living, every one of us who is here today. Face to face, Adonai spoke to you on the mountains out of the fire. I stood between Adonai and you at that time to convey Adonai's words to you, for they were afraid of the fire and did not go up the mountain, saying, I, Adonai, am your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods beside me. You shall not make for yourself a sculptured image, any likeness of what is in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or the waters below the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, your God, Adonai, am an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generations of those who reject me, but showing kindness to the thousandth generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not swear falsely by the name of your God, Adonai, for Adonai will not clear one who swears falsely. Wait, who swear? Okay. Observe, who swears falsely by God's name. Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as your God Adonai has commanded you. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work. And the seventh day is the Sabbath of your God Adonai. You shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do. And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and your God Adonai freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, God Adonai has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Honor your father and your mother, as your God Adonai has commanded you, that you may long endure, and that you may fare well in the land that your God, as Adonai, is assigning you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and none of you shall crave your neighbor's house or field or male or female slave or ox or ass or anything that is your neighbor's. Adonai spoke these words, those and no more, to your whole congregation at the mountain with a mighty voice out of the fire and the dense clouds. God inscribed them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me.
I think we're going to stop here for a second. The normal place would have been to stop at the end of the Ten Commandments, per se, as they are like understood in some degree. But this line 19, where it says, Adonai spoke those words, those and no more. Yep, right there, just that. To those and no more to your whole congregation at the mountain. Line 19 right there. I
Yeah.
just thought that is really important to include on there because what is those and no more? Because we have a line earlier, don't add or delete or take away anything.
Is it because that's really what it is in a nutshell?
Is there a nutshell?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth, and all the rest is commentary. It's sort of the same thing that I'm thinking, those are the basic commandments. Everything else is commentary about that, or it's a way to live, but those are the basic tenets of a way to live. I don't know. That's just my thought that it's actually it's if you want to simplify it, which really it's never simple, But if you can read all these words of the first 5 books of Moses and all the prophets and all the stuff, but it really comes down to those 10 tenets, those 10 laws.
Yeah, and actually I did go down the rabbit hole of trying to define them by number this morning. And I said, what a stupid exercise. Why am I spending my time, right, Hugo? I spent like 10 minutes. I was like, that is silly. That's not the point. The point is, in whatever way you're looking at it, there is a completeness. It's up to you to understand it. Like you have your lifetime, but it's still up to you to understand it.
It's not going down the rabbit hole when you just look at all these things anew and a closer reading. I think what you were referencing that I said also from 4:2 is, nothing's supposed to be changed, and yet when we look back to how it's written in Exodus, it is different than this. So what does that mean? Nothing's supposed to be changed. In the current iteration, it's not supposed to be changed until tomorrow. I don't know. We just read through the whole 10 Commandments and we didn't even stand up.
Yeah, I thought about it. But again, because it's hard for me to know where they end. It's easy to see where they start. But
Where does it say stand up?
it's a tradition when you chant.
I know that's my point exactly. That you can add all these things to it, but the basic laws, the basic 10 Commandments are the 10 Commandments. Standing up is rabbinical, isn't it? Or whatever.
Right. So you're saying, is it more important to stand up or to obey?
Exactly. Exactly.
I see Danny's hand, I see Alan's hand. And Ruth Ellen after that.
Yeah, this thing about those who know more, that is a very loose translation of the Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And the syntax is very different too. I was trying to find Everett Fox's more literal translation. I ran out of time, but these words God spoke to all of your congregation at the mountain from the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the another word for
Fog.
With a voice, a big voice, and lo yasaf. And lasaf can mean add, or it can also mean cease.
Right.
So Rashi says, we enter this in the Targum, the Aramaic translation by Lo Pasak. He did not cease, because his characteristics of human beings that they are unable to utter all their words in one breath, but like pauses. And it is characteristic of the Holy One that this is not so, therefore he did not pause. In other words, he's uttered all this in one not breath, because he doesn't breathe, right? For God's voice is strong and goes on continually. Another, that's based on Tractate Sanhedrin. Another explanation of Lo Yosaf, he did not again reveal himself with such publicity. Let me see what the Hebrew words are. Hold on. Befumbi, in public. So, in other words, God said this in the hearing of all of Israel, and that was the last time God said anything in the hearing of all of Israel. So, problem solved, folks. Thank you, Rashi.
Alan?
I was
Gotta run
intrigued.
out for a second. I'll be back. Sorry.
I was intrigued that we get sort of an expansion on the reasoning or the supporting arguments for most of the commandments, but there are the four toward the in the second portion that are just they're so powerful, or at least that's my interpretation. They're so powerful that they don't need any explanation. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness. And those are standing alone without any supporting argument. And I think is this to say there's no question about these. The others, you might wonder why. Why should I respect my parents? They spanked me, or something like that. And these, there's no questioning those. They don't need amplification.
Right.
They are
Right.
things that that throw a wrench into society that is not fixable. Once you murder someone, they're gone. Murder is different than killing. But if you bear false witness against your neighbor, you killed them in the eyes of their society.
Yeah.
Like, it's not retrievable. So that's how I've come to understand those last few. There's just some things that, they are so easily damaging that just don't go there. Like, and then you backtrack to the earlier ones, and they do need explanation. They're not just, don't, honor your father and mother, because if not, I'll strike you dead. No. It's so that your days will be long
upon you.
right? And I agree. There's something there. Then legally, the way the translation is, like the very big distinction between do not kill and do not murder. It's two different things altogether. You can't even. I don't even understand how anyone thought that the translation would be one and the same. And it's exactly
10
that
is
point.
very different. The word covet in 10 is very different than everything else there, because who actually knows about coveting except God, who's reading your mind? Because that's something inside of you. And none of the other commandments actually reference anything like that at all.
Go back to Jimmy Carter lusting in his heart.
Exactly what I was thinking. I was going to add that, and I thought, Jimmy Carter, okay.
Okay. I don't know if Ruth Ellen, you had your hand up before,
Aside
Arnie.
before on your, let me go real first to Yehuda's point. I keep going back to this again and again. That sometimes we have to balance thinking about this in its universal, timeless way that we want to look at it, versus the fact that this was still an oral tradition. We're still reading after the fact in Exodus and here things that were handed down oral. Every time I read this, all I can think of is like watching Roots, the Kunta Kinte. They had to keep. Don't forget this. Don't forget this. The oral tradition and that game of telephone. Of course, you could say don't change a word here or there, but it's changed. But even then, that's relative because it's changed as to how somebody later wrote it down. I just want people to keep that in mind. We all know what it's like playing the game of telephone or hearing a story and then saying it again and knowing we changed the words because we don't, we're trying to get the gist of it. And number two, this is mostly just for Alan, but just in general too. Is it a nutshell? You'll get to me. You'll know what I'm talking about. Was the George Carlin riff on how he got it down to only one commandment and everything that was important, The main thing is, instead of talking about how many we need, if people actually behave that way, that's what would get us somewhere, But that's my dream. That's looking for the utopia. But
Arnie.
Well, you can say that there's no room for interpretation, but I can promise you there are whole books in the Talmud on what is murder and what is not murder. For instance, if I kill somebody in a war, is that murder?
No.
Well, but that you could see that it could say that it was. There's a case to be made that it was, but in the Talmud they decided under these circumstances it is not.
So actually that's addressed in the issue of cities of refuge, which we skipped over. There were like 3 or 4 lines that pertain to cities of refuge and where they are. But the idea of cities of refuge are that exactly that. Killing can happen. The intention behind the killing is what differentiates it between killing and murder.
Which brings us back to a hypothetical case. Let's say in a fit of being a zealous follower of God's word, you spear 2 lovers in the middle of their tryst, and then you get celebrated by being made into a priest. It sort of boggles. You say, wait a minute, isn't that murder? least
Yes,
I say that.
I see your problem there.
I
We
do
still haven't
too.
resolved that one.
Exactly, Ellen.
That's why the rabbis
Respect.
circumscribed it so carefully as say this is not precedent for anything.
Yeah. Um, we
You know,
can,
something that
yeah,
Aviva and I came up with this morning was Aviva found a table, I think it was in Wikipedia, which compared how all these different texts treat the Ten Commandments. And probably the single most unique thing is what the Jews consider the second commandment. None of the other books did at all, and it uses and I said, well, commandments number 2 and number 3 have to do with senses. Number 2 has to do with seeing imagery. Number 3 has to do with hearing. And none of the others are there either. I mean, the Ten Commandments are a pretty amazing set of words. But then I had this completely other different thought is that how can we even assume for a second that even though we call these words, that that's how God communicated? I don't think God communicated with words. Nonsense. God communicated however God communicated, but it was not with words. They ended up with words on the paper, but that's not how it actually happened. And, and I mean, you weren't told, when we say Shema Yisrael, we're not told to listen to words. The word Shema is this much bigger understanding.
Anytime anybody wants to move along so we can actually include the Shema in our discussion, we're only a few lines away.
That's right. You wanted to do the whole thing on that. Well,
Can I
Yes,
just mention
Danny.
one thing? It's Aseret HaDibrot. It's not
Yeah.
mitzvot. You probably have done this in other years, but it's God's utterances, and there are more than 10 mitzvot contained therein, and they're per Yehuda. There are different ways of parsing that out, but there are definitely more than 10 actual mitzvot here. So, for whatever that's worth.
No, I agree that practice of trying to find the exact 10 of them was just like, that's silly. That's it's done for the acknowledging the frailty of the human ability to comprehend more than a certain amount at a time, and that like ability to put it in columns so we can look at it, and it's shorthand is what it is. It's just shorthand. But we're human. Okay, someone read.
I'll do it.
Okay.
And when you heard the voice out of the darkness while the mountain was ablaze with fire, you came up to me, all your tribal heads and elders, and said, our God Adonai has just shown us a majestic presence, and we have heard God's voice out of the fire. We have seen this day that humankind may live, though addressed by God. And let us not die then, for this fearsome fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of our God Adonai any longer, we shall die. You turned the page a little ahead of me there. For what mortal ever heard the voice of the living God speak out of the fire as we did and lived? You go closer and hear all that our God Adonai says. And then you tell us everything that our God Adonai tells you. And we will willingly do that. Shamanu ve'asinu. Adonai heard the plea that you made to me, and Adonai said to me, I have heard the plea that people made to you. They did well to speak thus. May they always be of such mind to revere me and follow all my commandments, that may go well with them and with their children forever. Go say to them, return to your tents. But you remain here with me, and I will give you the whole instruction, the laws and the rules that you shall impart to them, for them to observe in the land that I'm giving them to possess. And be careful then to do as your God Adonai has commanded you. Do not turn aside to the right or to the left. Follow only the path that your God Adonai has enjoined upon you, so you may thrive and that it may go well with you, and that you may long endure in the land you are to possess. And this is the instruction, the laws and the rules that your God, Adonai, has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere your God, Adonai, and follow, as long as you live, all the divine laws and commandments that I enjoin upon you, to the end that you may long endure. And obey, O Israel, willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as Adonai, the God of your ancestors, spoke to you.
Very future oriented. Very, very future oriented, which, brings me to the sadness that I feel for the generation of my kids, who a lot of them among the, especially among the more educated, have chosen not to have children. There's a break in the long line of hope and future orientation. It's it's always about the children. Whatever you do is so that the continuation. At the moment you are here on this timeline and this trajectory, you are doing it for future, whatever you're doing, the good and the bad, you're doing for future generations. So that your days may be long, so that your children, you and your children, all the days of your life. Oh yeah, and then in line 29 that you read, you don't have to turn the thing here, Ellen, I got a good translation. Be careful then to do as your God Adonai has commanded you. Do not turn aside to your right or to your left. You though, I want to hear what you said, so you have to unmute.
An absolute direct condemnation of partisanship.
I was thinking the same thing.
Thank you.
Moderation, yay!
Yeah, and when those were written, the right and left were not such loaded terms, even though they were just directional orientation.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's a whole part of Jews today that only know how to do a right turn.
I keep thinking over and over, these are the big crux questions when Yehuda says, how did they use language? And that's what I learned. What I started thinking in a very Darwinistic way of looking at all this. Human beings were able to create language. We wouldn't have Judaism. We wouldn't have groups uniting to have a certain way of explaining the universe and having a God or whatever. We couldn't do it as a community if we didn't ultimately end up with some kind of communication language. We were able to evolve and survive by developing language that supposedly made it easier for us to understand each other's experiences, and it still will never be that experience because we're, it's like I said, it's the closest thing we can get to experiencing what another person does. That's the difference kind of between sympathy and empathy. You can't, it's the best we can do, and it's better than maybe a lot of other species do. And then you talk about having children or not. Sometimes I've started to have this feeling like the hubris of man to think that we are here to do any more than pass on our DNA, just like the locusts that come out every 17 years, to say that there's more involved in this. Well, maybe this is part of the Darwinian survival of the fittest, that these civilizations evolved and then they created a sense of theology and whatever. And the way to help ensure that people, in fact, do have children, now we're going against that to some degree, and a certain other, is to impose that upon them, that it's their duty, and ultra orthodox and people who follow these religious traditions very with God, I can't think of words anymore. Perfect literalism, you know? And why is that? Because otherwise we're going to be the Shakers and we're going to be no more after a while, right? You know?
Craig had his hand up.
Right. I think this discussion of children is good. And we can all take note that there are no children on this Zoom call. Or
Oh,
anybody.
Reba is trying to show us a real live child right there. There. Thank you, Reba.
Okay, there we go. All right. But bring up the religious who take this having children and passing it along to children very seriously, very literally. And among my contemporaries, very few of us have grandchildren. I have two boys. I'm not looking for grandchildren anytime soon. They're not married or anything like that. But that's the common situation for the non-Orthodox. But I have an Orthodox friend who had 3 kids, and he has now got 24 grandchildren, half of them in Israel. Okay, so you can do the math and see what's going on. And the other thing I would point out, I don't know how many people watched Real Time with Bill Maher on Shabbos. Maybe you shouldn't, but they talked about the 10 Commandments and the new law in Texas that it has to be displayed on the wall. And just think about how they're putting it up as a piece of art to be revered and worshiped, so to speak, and the implications of that given our Torah portion here. They obviously had to pick one version of the 10 Commandments over the other, and they went with the King James. Not a total offense to Jews, but the nuance between kill and murder isn't necessarily recognized. So I just bring those things up because it was triggered in my head by our discussion in this parsha.
That's idolatry.
Yeah.
That's idolatry.
Mhm.
Put it up
Oh.
there for what? Because you're not allowed to discuss it.
No, it's Christian nationalism is what it is.
Yeah. Alan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I would like to point out that you know how different things jump out at you at the 4th or 5th time we've gone around in this. This line 28, I will give you the whole instruction, the laws and the rules, implying to me that what we have seen in the Torah is not the whole thing, and this opens the door to all of the interpretation, all of the midrash and everything else that amplifies, or what was the term that in Sarah Neely's movie that she used, the white fire, black fire, the spaces between the words are as important as the words themselves, and this seems to open the door to that, of saying here's a set of instructions of the whole set, and Moses is the only one who got them, so we've got to figure that out.
Again, it's a shorthand. There are a lot of words like that about the allness of, what is habrit hazot, this covenant? Where is it spelled out? Where's the whole Megillah, the whole thing? It's not. It's a shorthand. The rest is go study it. Spend your lifetime on it. Danny?
First of all, one of the terms for the tablets is Shnei Luchot Habrit, the 2 tablets of the covenant. Secondly, there's a tradition that says, and I can't reproduce this memory, but there are ways of looking at the Dibrot as rubrics under which you can find a place for all the so-called 613 mitzvot.
Yep.
So, which is a way for the tradition to sort of underline the seminal role of the Dibrot without doing what Christianity did, which say, well, these are the most important Dibrot commandments, and all those other mitzvot like kashrut or whatever, they're not as important. And so anyway, I'm sure that's findable. How I think there's more than one schema of doing it that way, branching out from each of the 10 into many, many more commandments. But anyway, that's my contribution about
I
that.
have no doubt that that shorthand of the 10 utterances is meant to be that. Like, you can find any instance in which a human has caused harm to another human, to the environment, to themselves, and find it somewhere in that shorthand. And then if you have more time to study, then you expand it to maybe the 613. But the idea is not that it's only these. And if you, I mean, if you can't find it and if you can't prove that this is what it says, then it doesn't mean that. The Voting Rights Act, I mean, you know, there's a concept behind it, but if you can say, well, this doesn't count anymore, or this never said that, or whatever, it's silly to look at things in their simplest form and say only that and nothing else. God gets to say that. We don't get to say that.
Right.
That's, you know, that takes away the idolatry part. Marilyn, I think you're trying to say something.
I'm listening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't know that you guys, I've heard the whole thing. I haven't said a word because I didn't think I could be heard. I just dialed in. I wasn't able to get on the other way. Anyway, I'm enjoying this discussion, and it's been good to just be quiet and listen to everybody. So I wasn't trying to say anything. I might have just
Okay,
uttered,
your
I
screen
don't
lit
know.
up. Okay, Ruth Ellen, you are trying to say something.
Here I am again. Well, this is a part that I have trouble with, and I think it goes back to human nature, wanting a binary. And again, keeping in my mind how I learned about the 10 commandments when I was 6 years old. It's the 10 things written out there. And then everywhere it says he gave him the whole law, the whole law. This again is what happens if we have to take it too literally, because only through doing this study with you did I think about one of the reasons that that Moses was up there so long the second time, because it said he literally wrote everything down that God told him, right? Supposedly the first time God did it with his own finger equivalent or whatever, and the second time it was reiterated. So it's not just the 10 commandments on those tablets. So as I'm saying to Yehuda, well, we have to remember this was given like an oral tradition. But on one level, presumably, if they ever do find the Ark of the Covenant, a la Indiana Jones, everything was there in one way or the other, which is why it makes sense what you and the rabbi just said about it being, they're like kind of like the Rosetta Stone or something, like they're using semaphores or something like that. Or even the tradition, like we say now, that the multitude is there because it's reading between the lines. Maybe that's also a reference to the fact that we say just, and we put it up on our narrative, on our arcs and everything, just those 10 ones we're reading now, but it really was all of them, But that's what's hard, I think, in modern times to wrap one's head around, because if you read this literally, there's a lot of things that don't jive, there's inconsistencies. So that's another argument for looking beyond just the physical narrative and trying to understand this as a chronological history of a people as opposed to a spiritual awakening and effort to create a modus operandi for living an ethical and spiritual and fulfilling, meaningful life, knowing that it's going to end one day, except through passing it on to the next generation. But for each individual, it's
Which is a perfect segue to what we have coming up next.
Yes, and Alan, you're reading it because it's very
Uh-oh.
short lines. I know you have a lot of roles,
No.
but you're only going to read the Shema and the first part of the Vahavta that we chant after it.
Okay. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai alone. And you shall love your God, Adonai, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day, and impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. And take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day, and inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And when your God Adonai brings you into the land that was sworn to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to be assigned to you, great and flourishing cities that you did not build, and houses full of good things that you did not fill, hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant, and you eat your fill, take heed that you do not forget Adonai who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. Revere only your God and worship God alone, and swear only by God's name. Do not follow other gods, any gods of the peoples about you, for your God Adonai in your midst is an impassioned God, lest the anger of your God Adonai blaze forth against you, wiping you off the face of the earth.
Okay, thank you. You went a little further than I intended, but that's fine. So this is what I want to point out here. Okay, so there are these great concepts. Oh, you tell other people how they should live their lives. You read these things, you make proclamations, you blame others for when things don't turn out right, or other people otherizing, right? This idea. But listen to how, okay, so this is a Hebrew lesson. When a word ends with the chaf sofit, the chaf being the letter, sofit meaning it has its form when it comes at the end of the word, and it sounds like cha at the end of a word. So someone point out how many times we hear it. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha, bechol nafshecha, ubechol meodecha. Okay, this is going to keep going. Love, and leave it up so I can read the English. You shall love whose God? Your God. With all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, or as I like to say, your everythingness. And you take to heart these instructions, which I charge who? You. When? Oh, who are you going to tell them to? Your children. When are you going to speak of them? When you sit down. B'shivtecha. Where? In your home. But also as you walk. U'belechtecha. Baderech. And as you lie down. And when you wake up. How many merisms can we fit into just a few lines here? And take to heart. Whose heart? Livavecha. On line 8 I am now. And take to heart these instructions which I charge you. To whose heart are you going to take to heart? Your heart. And you write them on whose mezuzot? On the doorposts. On whose doorposts? Your doorposts.
Yeah.
And your gates.
Yeah. So it's all up to you.
Well,
it's all about you. It's all about inside you.
It's all about doing.
But you have to do it. It's in.
Yes.
It's you're the only one that knows inside of you, in your own consciousness, how you relate to God. And also, if you go a little further, it basically says if you get too out of line, God can take you out of the body.
Well, because
for your own sake.
Immediately after those lines, and the next lines are, and when Adonai your God brings you into the land that was sworn to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to be assigned to you, great and flourishing cities that you did not build, houses full of good things that you did not fill, hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant.
That's right.
And you get to eat your fill.
Without God, you can do nothing.
He's a gracious God because it's given without merit. We don't deserve it.
That's right. But also,
or we may not deserve it,
Exactly.
Well, we don't deserve it any more than others.
It's not up to the rabbis or, the whoever to decide what you on the inside, what your relationship is with Hashem. It really is not, So I think that's, for me, that's a problem. That's all I'll say for myself. But it's also a solution because with your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole being. So ultimately, it's me, it's you, it's each one of us that that know our relationship to God and whether that relationship is in right standing. And I'm not perfect. None of us is perfect. Sometimes I backslide, but oops, okay, I bring myself back into relationship.
Danny has his hand up, and after that, Ruth Ellen.
Two things. First of all, did you mention that this is all in the singular?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't. Thank you. That was the other thing I was going to mention. It doesn't say levavchem. It says, yes, the singular, you, the singular. Thank
That's
you.
why I said it's each
Yeah.
person's individual relationship with God.
Right.
It's
And a
not
lot
for
of
somebody
times,
else.
a lot of times in Devarim, it's in the plural, addressed to the people.
Right.
You know. The other is if can indulge me. So, I always have the notes from my book. Devarim's coming out in October, finally. And this is from Richard Elliott Friedman's commentary on the Torah. I don't know if you guys have that one, but he's talking about the word Shema, which doesn't mean hear. It means, listen carefully in this context. Forms of the word Shema occur about 80 times in Deuteronomy. This emphasis on listening goes together with the title and theme of the book, Words, Moses' speech. The great events of creation, patriarchs, Exodus, Sinai, and the wilderness are at an end. What remains now is the word, the story of what happened and the commandments to be fulfilled. Israel's task now, and in its future generations, is to listen, to learn the story, and to do the commandments. And so this passage, probably the most commonly known and frequently repeated words in the Bible by Jews, begins with the commandment that necessarily precedes all others: listen. And I think that fits in well with things that a number of people have been saying.
Mm.
Isn't that a great?
And I'm glad you said that too about the singular and the Hebrew. Again, there's dichotomy there because the idea of a plural you, my mother used to say uses, because it starts out, "Hear, O Israel." Well, he's not talking to Yaakov, the original Israel, right? I mean, the talk. So it's on two levels. It's the children of Israel as a family, really, an extended family. And then, but you can't have a family without each individual member doing their part. So you have to almost look at that two ways. You look at it that it's in the whole, and then each one. If each one tries, and as human beings, we're fallible and we're going to fail. But if we help each other hold each other up doing it, even if one particular atom in the whole element, flounders, it's not going to be it's not going to be permanently mortal, because as a whole it will still continue. So I think there is a multitude in there, and of course that so much of it is so poetic. And when you said the idea, then the other thing that came to me when you just said, like, listen carefully, it's instead of saying here, and we talked about this, it's almost like saying attention, give me your attention. And everything, bringing in these other traditions that we talk about how to have a personal relationship from your heart to the eternal, the universal consciousness, what all these things talk about, is to be attentive. What your mind attends to, it considers, what it considers it believes, and what it believes it eventually does. That's a paraphrase of something my husband said all over and over again. I finally looked it up and it's by an anonymous source. So that's half the trouble with the world today, is they don't pay attention. And then we get distracted by all this gobbledygook to entertain us. And when you realize all these commandments are there, and following them and putting it frontlets between your eyes and all that, it's a way to help as physical beings with fallibilities and physical needs, to focus our energy where it really counts when all these other things are distracting us. Some things have to distract us sometimes, like how to eat, how to protect ourselves from inclement weather and all that. You have to do both, but you have to prioritize. One is a means to an end, and the other is the means, the essence of meaning itself. And that's and having the law and having this, that's what Mount Sinai is, having that, dividing the heavens and the earth and making that distinction. And in some ways, everything we're trying to do is to bring us back to that point of unity so that we can understand where we came from and where we might well go back to.
Alan?
And with the concept of hear or listen, I like to draw kind of a tortured parallel to the era that we're living in today, where if you don't see it on video or don't see a picture of it, whether it's somebody's dessert in a restaurant or an accident in the street or something happening, if you don't see the video, you don't believe it really happened. Well, when we look at what's said here, it's said as the words were spoken. The people there, or all of us, if we believe the concept that we were all present at Sinai, the words were spoken to us. They weren't just written down and handed to us on a piece of parchment. They were spoken, and that, maybe in this tortured parallel, makes them more believable. That it wasn't just something that we were written down and we were told, okay, this is what you live by. We heard those words spoken, and that's what we follow because we believed it's real.
Yuda?
Well, we have this, this two-part tradition, the written and the oral. And the written is the Torah we're studying now, and the oral is our study. And we have always prized our study. We are part of the oral tradition right here as we meet every Shabbat. And it's truly precious because I don't think there's ever an assumption that we're getting it right. It's rather that we're trying to figure it out. And as long as we're actively figuring it out, we're on that road of 10,000 miles, and we don't have to get to the end. We just have to stay on the road and keep figuring it out.
Craig,
Not to put, you
I-
say something.
Right. I totally embrace those remarks, and we get to wrestle with God, and God was generous to provide us with the Ten Commandments and the Torah and the Shema, but some of the words seem really demanding and a little egotistical, dare I say. No offense, Hashem, but maybe it's the wrong Hebrew translation, but when it says you have to give all of your soul, all of your might, it's like, well, can't we have something left for our loved ones, our friends? Well, maybe that's a poor Hebrew translation, but it's so demanding. And I wonder if we can soften that up a little.
Well, it even calls into question, what does it mean to give all of your heart,
Right.
your soul, your mind? What does that even mean?
It's like somebody going into a monastery or somebody who just dedicates themselves to Torah, nothing else. And I don't think that's the right way to live. But what is the word? Kol, and is the word really all? And everything else is supposed to be secondary. Our love for a human, secondary to God. And doesn't that seem egotistical, or is that disrespect?
I'm just gonna say a cautionary tale about binaryism. There is no all or nothing. That's the thing. We want that. We want to understand it that way. That's the caution. You can give your all to your partner, your society, your community, your God. It does not diminish you. It enhances you. by giving your all, you become more. You don't become less. That's
I agree.
how I
I
read it.
agree.
Mhm.
I think you're right, Aviva, and I think that by doing that, that's how you give your all to God. In other words, it's Craig, it's not just what you give to God, it's what you do on the earth, because we live on the earth. We live within communities and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, we have to live every day, but just even washing the dishes, making dinner, doing all that, it's just
Right.
in gratitude by
You need to make constant tribute to God. We had a guy in Denver named Tim Tebow who became famous not just for getting the Broncos in the playoffs, which was a miracle that year, but every time he scored, he would kneel down and do a gesture to God. And when I read his book, the most prominent prayer that he mentions from his religious upbringing is the Shema, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your might, with all your soul. And that's how he puts it into practice. And it just seems if you are, well, he's not the most extreme, but some people just don't have time for anything else but God. And surely God doesn't want that, I would think.
Yeah.
I want to hear what
I want
Danny
to hear
has
what
to say.
Rabbi Pressman has to say. I'm chomping at the bit now.
Well, let's try translating it wholeheartedly and see what that does for you. And I was also going to talk about binaries. And I think it's also true that I think it was Heschel said that we don't believe in idols. We only have one thing in the world that is a B'Tselem Elohim, is the image of God, and that's every other human being. So one way to show our love for God is to act lovingly towards other human beings.
Yeah.
And so there's no contradiction here. And I just say one more thing about the Tim Tebows of the world. A bunch of years ago, I was looking for a particular thing, and I walked into a Christian bookstore. It turned out to be an evangelical bookstore, and they actually had what I was looking for. And she wasn't sure. She found it. She says, "Oh, God wanted me to find this for you." And my thought, which I did not express, was, I try not to bother God with little crap like that.
I love that.
So, which may not speak perfectly about me, but that kind of sense of divine providence, I, as a non-sports guy, I profoundly believe that God could not care less who wins a particular game, and that borders on idolatry, blasphemy, and stupidity. But that's just my opinion. So, at any rate, the point here
You
is,
got you got company. You've got company. I just
so
have to let you know you're not alone.
so this phrase means just love God completely, wholeheartedly with your heart, which was for them the mind, and your soul, your breath, and modecha, which is often interpreted your material means. And so, and in fact, if I can just say one more story, I think Shimon Bar Yochai was, have you ever heard the story? He and his son were hiding out from the Romans in a cave and for a bunch of years, and they were just really living this life of Torah study and Dveikud, of nearness to God. And they heard that the decree against them was annulled. So they come out and they see, people are planning crowds, people are just living lives, and they say, how can they be doing this? When they could be living this holy life and in constant communion with God. And it says that everywhere they looked, God just burned up from the passion of their whatever. And God speaks, a bat kol, a heavenly voice comes out and says, back in the cave. This is not what I want out of you or anyone or out of the world. So anyway, I think that's
Very
relevant.
good. Very good. And to
Just
get
true.
back to Craig's point, where is Craig? Did he bounce off now?
No,
He's still online,
video.
but he's turned his camera off.
Oh,
He may
I
have
see. Yeah, okay.
stepped away from
Well,
you.
anyway, what he was talking about egotistical, people who walk around acting like they're very godly, uh, it starts to appear arrogant. And, that's in response to, isn't that egotistical? I mean, it's too bad he's not here. But anyway, um, I just wanted to mention that kind of arrogance
sorry,
that you
can I
have
just
to be careful of, you know, of that.
can I just
Anyway,
jump in with one of my favorite jokes?
yeah, love it.
So it's high holidays, and the cantors and the rabbi and the shamus are in front of the ark, and the cantors singing, the Hineni, and there's a word, Ephes ayin on the, I am nothing, I am nothing. And the cantor, as they've been known to do, starts repeating it with great, I am nothing, I am nothing. And the rabbi, not to be outdone, starts also, I too am nothing, I am nothing. And the shamus gets caught up in the fervor of the moment, and he says, I am nothing. And the rabbi nudges the cantor and says, look who thinks he's nothing.
Craig, did you hear what I said before?
You broke up a little.
Oh, I was just saying that you mentioned egotism. If you walk around like you're holier than thou and all you're doing is, serving God, serving. And what I said was, after a while, if you do that, you start to appear arrogant. You appear to be arrogant.
Right.
And so that's kind of a danger, I think.
I want
So
Rabbi Pressman to know that I do have a rabbi joke that he hasn't heard, but I won't say it here
why?
because it might offend you or some
It's
other
not going
people.
to offend
Let me guess,
me.
it's a little
But
misogynistic.
I remember his challenge that he's heard every rabbi joke. So I heard every lawyer joke.
You can,
Okay.
But I'm afraid that my accusation of egotism was aimed higher toward Hashem, and why does he crave this love? What is it about Hashem, or am I making him into a human? He's just doing that for our own instruction, and I'm looking at it the wrong way. But if he was a human, which of course the Christians have made him human, it seems like, wow, you're needy, that you need all my love, all my this or that.
There is a, philosophical question of who needs who more. Does God need man or does man need God?
Well, probably both. I would say both. Because there's that old story about, if uh if a if a if a father, if a child does something because he's afraid or he'll be disciplined or there's be some kind of retribution, that's that's not as good as if a child does something on their own to please their parent, their father. And it's the same thing with God. And also making teshuvah. I mean, somebody who comes back, supposedly God treasures more. Somebody who's fallen and comes back than somebody who's already holy. So that tells us something that God takes joy out of us when we do something just for the sake of pleasing God.
I
Is
don't
that
know the
correct?
order.
Am I thinking the right way?
You're always thinking the right way, Sarah.
Ay. With all these medicines I take, sometimes I wonder. Although I've cut down a lot, so maybe I'm getting better.
Um, Alan,
I think Ruth
Yehuda,
Ellen
and
was.
Ruth Ellen.
I
And
think Ruth Ellen
Yehuda's got
preceded
his
me.
hand up too.
Yeah, I don't know. I had my head down. I didn't see the order.
Alan,
So
was I first? I'll
I
let you
think so,
decide,
Ruth
Alan,
Ellen. Yeah.
because, okay. Only because I'm going to forget, because I'm going all the way back to what Yehuda was talking about, how, and I agree with him, that this oral tradition and what we're doing, it's not the answer, it's that you keep asking. But then Aviva went a while, because I always looked at her, because I said, it's keeping these two things in balance at the same time. And I'm asking this with all humility. And the thing is, because the elephant in the room, the things that we don't want to talk about, what's going on in this world, and especially how it affects us as Jews today, because looking for answers in the Bible, and we talked about this last week, and to Viva's point, I totally agree with. How do we make this a living document in our days and how we live? And we have to do that. So it's the journey, not the destination. By talking about it all over and over again, we gain new insights. And we who? We, the individual, you, each individual atom, or all of us as a group. And yet part of what we have to do to show our devotion to Hashem and the way Jews have consistently lived is to be to treat the stranger as ourselves, is to treat people with dignity, is to support the less fortunate, and all this stuff that we're not doing. So, the real question is how do we integrate the personal, individual, internal with what's required? I guess this Rabbi Daniel with his ethics committee, how do we effectively especially in this day and age where everything seems helter-skelter and there seem to be so many places you can point your attention and try to do something to make things better, whatever, quote unquote. It's this dichotomy that keeps coming up to me every time. I agree, yes, it's personal. I agree, yes, we're always looking, and then yet, so what? How are we going to stop this misery that's going on now? It's a big question.
All right, I think that you then, Alan, I don't know in what order.
Whoever, Yehuda, you want to go ahead?
Alan, you.
I just have a very small thing to say is that it's a little strange to me that I'm just going to go back to the first one, heart, soul, and might. The reality of this is missing the word that you have to do this, which is give. And give's the important word. It's not there. And there's an assumption that, of course, that's what it is. I mean, you can't take love. You can only give people love. And it's a little strange to me that it's not more clearly delineated that way.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Quickly, is that merism again? Because how can it be delineated? It's a continuum. It's a continuum.
I wanted to follow up on Craig's idea that that there's a certain arrogance maybe in God's pronouncement. And I know we've talked about this before, where you can see examples of a certain vanity that sometimes they've been appealed to say, what would people think of a God who would let his people die out in the desert, and the idea of appealing to God's vanity. But I think it's more about people and their hubris, or their sense of knowing in their belief what God stands for. Because how many wars have been fought with both sides saying God is on our side? One of them is going to be very disappointed because unless God can be on both sides. And it just seems like it's a human nature to say we're in the right, but we're not the ones who are going to decide that and say God is on our side, and yet they go into battle with that as a banner.
Yeah, it's true.
Sarah, you have your hand up.
I do. I just want to reiterate, in case you haven't seen, what Rabbi Pressman said, because he doesn't want to talk too much. So I'm going to say it for him, because it's really very good that, many modern scholars give meaning loyalty to the covenant relationship by its behavioral obligations, the mitzvot. you can't just live in heaven. You have to bring it down to earth, whatever heaven is. I know we don't really have that concept, but uh, I think the mitzvot are really there to that counters the arrogance that I'm so holier than thou kind of attitude. It's not just by doing all of that. You have to really, you know, do the mitzvot, the obligation.
So there's two lines coming up, and we don't have to adhere to this thing of reading everything, but there are two lines in 6:20 through, well, whatever. Let's read that section. I think Ellen ended at 16, or no, you ended at 19. I forget. Okay,
I think
someone
I ended
read.
at 15 before, so.
Okay. All right. So someone who hasn't read yet, I don't know, maybe Yuda? Because there's some lines here in the 20s,
Hey.
23 through 25 I want to get to.
Do not try your God Adonai as you did at Massah. Be sure to keep the commandments, decrees, and laws that your God Adonai has enjoined upon you. Do what is right and good in the sight of Adonai, that it may go well with you, and that you may be able to possess the good land that your God Adonai promised on oath to your fathers, and that all your enemies may be driven out before you as Adonai has spoken. When, in time to come, your children ask you, what mean the decrees, laws, and rules that our God Adonai has enjoined upon you, straight from the Haggadah? You shall say to your children, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Adonai freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand. Adonai wrought before our eyes marvelous and destructive signs and portents in Egypt against Pharaoh and all his household, and us, God, freed from there in order to take us and give us the land promised on oath to our fathers. And then Adonai commanded us to observe all these laws, to revere our God Adonai for our lasting good and for our survival, as is now the case. It will be, therefore, to our merit before God Adonai to observe faithfully this whole instruction as God has commanded us. When your God Adonai brings you to the land that you are about to enter and possess, and God dislodges many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations much larger than you, and your God Adonai delivers them to you, and you defeat them. You must doom them to destruction, and grant them no terms, and give them no quarter. And you shall not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your children away from me to worship other gods. And Adonai's anger will blaze forth against you, promptly wiping you out. Instead, this is what you shall do to them, and you shall tear down their altars, smash their pillars, and cut down their sacred posts, and consign their images to the fire. For you are a people consecrated to your God Adonai of all the peoples on earth. Your God Adonai chose you to be God's treasured people. It is not because you are the most numerous of peoples that Adonai grew attached to you and chose you. Indeed, you are the smallest of peoples. But it was because Adonai favored you and kept the oath made to your fathers that Adonai freed you with a mighty hand and rescued you from the house of bondage, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know, therefore, that only your God, Adonai, is God, the steadfast God, who keeps the divine covenant faithfully to the thousandth generation of those who love God and keep them divine commandments, but who instantly requites with destruction those who reject God, never slow with those who reject, but requiting them instantly, and therefore observe faithfully the instruction, the laws, and the rules with which I charge you today. And all I have to say is what happened to you're going to be as many as the sands on and the stars in the, oh, sorry, that was just a come on.
So that line
You're
25,
funny.
it will therefore be to our merit before our God Adonai to observe faithfully this whole instruction. You don't get to pick and choose. All right, Arnie.
I just read Jonathan Sachs' commentary on this before this Torah study, and that line about being the as many as the stars in the heaven, and yet being the few is what he comments on. And so I would recommend that, if you want to read about that, because he talks about that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also interesting. What is the Hebrew word for strike them down that we read in English? Do you have some Safari up or something like that?
Taros or something to that effect.
No, there's
What
more
verse
than
was that?
one way.
What verse was that?
It was chapter 7, but let me find the verse.
Because I've got Safari up.
Let's see. It was verse 2.
7:5, it says you shall tear them down, I think.
Okay, Alter says strike, but I'm sure it's very similar.
Doom them to destruction.
Vihikitem, you shall smite them. Hacharem,
Okay.
Hacharim, you shall,
Right.
Cherem, you shall utterly
Yeah.
destroy them.
So Makot, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So how does that fit in with the you shall not murder? Here we're being ordered to murder.
Okay,
Murder
so
is premeditated, I think, in our view.
We
And
just
again,
talked about that. That's in the context of war. I'm sorry.
I
No,
think
there-
the context is the idolatry.
exactly. It's not the people. It's the idolatry. That's
Okay.
the part that's really, really hard to understand because it appears, and if you wish to, you can justify a lot of actions by this last paragraph. I wish we hadn't read it. It kind of took a lot away from me, but that's exactly what I have to lean into. It is not people, it's the idolatry. It's always the idolatry. That's the thing that we're warned against all the time. Not to be like the other people. It doesn't mean anything but that. The other people who don't have the one God who tells you what to do. And that tells you what to do is too numerous to mention, or as simple as one word or 10 utterances. Like it can be anywhere along that. It's too much to include in any one place. Craig, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Craig.
Yes. I don't know the Hebrew translation of strike them down, but I know in Yiddish, my mom used to say Zetzebek to me a lot, which meant sit down. And it also
He just broke.
No, you're muted.
No, he broke up. He stopped.
He's
the
frozen.
Torah. I'm wondering if the no intermarriage, is that a commandment? Is that one of the 613? And then again, on the subject of are we the chosen people? And earlier in the parsha, we heard we are his very own people, and now we are his most treasured people. You can see how other religions would say, what's up with these Jews? They think they're superior.
Yes, historically, what you're saying is absolutely true. And especially that one, Am Sgula, that has been so, like anybody who wants to use that to anoint themselves or to hate others goes either way perfectly well. It fits either narrative. And here, so I've found three words that in the Hebrew are hishmid, which would be destroy. And then there was another one that um
Ishmitem.
I lost it. I should have kept my finger on there. Okay, and then in line 1, there's a interesting word, nashal goim rabim, dislodges many nations. Okay, and then in line 3, there's destroy again, hishmidcha. Well, different context, never mind. But line 5, can we get to line 5 there? Here's the why. Instead, this is what you shall do to them. You shall tear down their altars, smash their pillars, and cut down their sacred posts, and consign their images to the fire. Okay, it's the actions, it's the false gods. That's, so here it is. Am Segula is line 6. This is the most troubling line. There have been wars fought over this. For you are a people consecrated to your God, Adonai, of all the people on earth. Your God, Adonai, chose you to be God's treasured people. Okay, and then, I know the context, not because you're the most numerous, it's because you accepted the covenant for all of it. All of it. It's not going to buy you peace and quiet. The being chosen is going to buy you conflict. It's never going to buy peace and quiet, fat of the land, milk and honey. That's not what the chosenness is about.
Can I say something? Right? I'm the one who keeps talking about this epiphany I had. Language is the representation of experience. It's allowed the human species to evolve faster than some others, to cooperate and increase our standard of living, our longevity, all that. But it's never can substitute for the experience itself. So here again, everybody using these words and twisting them how it fits. And even there, like Aviva says, wars have started on that because it says Hashem chose you. What it doesn't say is, out of all the different peoples that he went to, we chose him as well as him choosing us because Abraham passed the test. That's why we were chosen. It wasn't just like, oh, for no reason, or you're the divine right of Judaism, like the divine right of kings to sit on the throne. We're not sitting on a throne. We, as the descendants of Abraham, earned that from hard tests and a lot of pain and suffering, among other things. And so that's easy to leave that out. So again, the multitude of explanation is between the words, it's just, and people looking for that simple answer, whether it's a binary choice or whatever, it's got to be too simple, and that's what's
Right, but Christianity and
hurting us,
Islam
I think.
have Abraham as their father figure too. They are the
Right.
Abraham religions. So I'm not sure Abraham resolves this. It's more Moses who got the law. Who
Well, yeah, well, I said Abraham the covenant, but then Israel was separated from that because Israel's the children of Jacob, really, is where that comes from in terms of genealogical speaking.
we've got
But
Ishmael and Hagar and
right. But that's why I said again last week. I mean, the first quarter or the first half of the first book is a general origin story about how life came to be. It's before the story of the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That is the rest of the 5 books of Moses. It does not discount creation and the notion that we live among other people. And so when you get down to it, over those thousands of years, or for at least the generations from Egypt until they got back to Israel, how many years was that? 400. It still always goes back to what our role is in the context of living in a broader world where there are still other people. And I always come back to this part because the discussions I had with my husband, who was someone who was born Catholic and went through the ritual, but it didn't mean anything, and he was a seeker, and he says I'm a semophile to the ultimate degree and lived in Miami Beach and all this. But when he started trying to study esoterically, he said part of the problem that's come into what's happening in the Middle East now is from these passages. Hashem said, don't leave a remnant of these people because they'll lead you astray. And it was the idolatry. And on top of that, not just the idolatry, but that they gave their children to Moloch. They had no sanctity for human life. The worst offense of these other peoples was sacrificing their own children to the presumed whims of their God. How could that be a true God? I am telling you, I am your true God because this is not what it means to be a human being. You know, this is not what's acceptable. And yet, so the Israelites went in there. I mean, it started with that first instant when Moshe got mad at them because they didn't kill everybody. They brought the women and children, and this is where we have this angst now because we have a sense of being human and have compassion for all living things, and especially the orphan and the widow. Why would we go ahead and kill the innocent children, whatever? I mean, and so we're seeing this replay out over and over again, and yet you know, so that those two things don't jive. And in modern times, among us, we Jewish remnants, you know, we care for the stranger, we care for the refugee, we care, and that's why it's so painful what's going on in Israel right now for most of us. I don't totally know how we square it. And some of the people in Israel and the far right leaders are trying to do it biblically, are they not? Somebody tell me I'm wrong. We don't want to talk about these things, but this is what it comes down to over and over again.
Let's hear Danny and Craig, and then
go off.
continue. Okay.
Briefly, first of all, I found this article. I'll put it by a professor in Israel about the whole thing of cherem, which means kill them all. And I want to take 2 points from it. The first is the ancient Near East was, everybody did this. If you want to really read something hair-raising, look up how the Assyrians treated conquest. You know, there was, so that's one thing. The second thing is that, again, later Judaism, Rabbinic Judaism, did their best to limit this to time and place, that this was not precedent for anything further. Sadly, there's some people on the so-called religious right today who want to say, well, that, you know, the Arabs are Amalek. Now, I think you can make a case that Hamas are kind of Amalek in the sense that they want to, contrary to what Arnie posted, they do want to wipe us out, man, woman, and child. But nonetheless, the rabbis were sensitive to this idea of, well, genocide, and said, you know, this was necessary at that time for various reasons, but we do not, just like Pinchas, we do not, this is not, and even the law of Amalek, they said basically Amalek was wiped out. So this is a dead letter, you know, don't follow this. This mitzvah is a dead letter. So there is that sensitivity, which is approximately our modern sensitivity, that this is not something that should be done in general.
Craig?
Well, I am a young guy, and a lot of this stuff happened before I was born, but Hitler seemed like, and I think we could talk about him, and if we wanted to get diverted, we could talk about other major figures who might be Amalek, including Muhammad, who killed Jews in the Battle of Crisis, slit their throats. And I don't know if all that's true or not. How do I know what's true before I was born? But here we're telling this story, as we have for quite a while in the last couple of months, about our Exodus, central story to the Jewish people. And I come to you humbly, Rabbi, kind of as a prohibition against intermarriage. And tell me, Rabbi, is there proof or good evidence that the Exodus really happened and that Jews really were slaves unto Pharaoh in Egypt? Or is that more like Adam and Eve or Noah's Ark, just a matter of faith and an instructional story?
Oh gosh, what a simple question. So again, trying to be brief, I'll say two things. One is, well, ultimately, we do not know. We don't have contemporary Egyptian records of a slave population freeing itself in one way or another. But on the other hand, we also know that royal histories were written the way Trump wants to write history, only the good parts and only the successes. So that's one thing. The second thing is that slaves were really considered subhuman in the ancient world, and it's very unlikely that a people would make that part of their foundational narrative. Thirdly, Richard Elliott Friedman, whose book I quoted before, has another book. I heard him speak it. I actually read it a bunch of years ago. One of his most, and he musters a lot of evidence that the people of Israel were enslaved, were freed from Egypt, without a lot of the miracle stuff, but that the core of the story. And if I may, that leads me to one more joke.
Okay.
So kid comes home from religious school and says, "What'd you learn about today?" He says, "Well, we learned about how the Jews were freed from slavery in Egypt." He says, "Really? What did you learn?" He says, "Well, they were running away from Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh was catching up. So they sent a bunch of people with flamethrowers in the back to keep them astray. And then they had engineers build a pontoon bridge across the sea, and they ran across that. And then they had the sappers go and blow up the bridge, and all the Egyptians died." She said, "Is that really what you learned in Hebrew school?" He says, "No, but the way they told it, you wouldn't believe it." So anyway, Richard Elliott Friedman, who's a very reputable scholar, does believe that there's a core truth to the story. Take it what you want.
There actually there is a mention of the in an Egyptian thing that has this Pharaoh says, "We have gotten rid of the Haparu and we have destroyed them," and like all things that the Pharaoh say, and what the Haparu are, it would be about the same time frame, but it's possible.
And,
I haven't
and
gone into
but
biblical archaeology much, but I bet they're finding more and more. If they can find evidence that there might have been a famine, by looking at geological dating or something, it may help. If the timing matches up, it could help give some physical proof.
Don't you ever
I'm
get
just
the feeling? Don't you ever get the feeling that there's parts of this that God is really insecure about his relationship with the Jews? It seems like it's an undercurrent running in a lot of this writing.
that's why I say it's a two-way street. God needs us as much as we need him. And maybe that's where, what was been left out of our tradition for so long is the more mystical, Kabbalistic things, which is what kind of dovetailed in with all the Buddhist, Hindu stuff that a lot of Jews have been attracted to. And Sarah, I think, can relate to this with me because that's how I came back to all this through my husband, who came back to Christianity through all that, but not the Catholic kind. He's more like a rabbi himself. But he always talks about esoterically that we're all part of this energy. The way it's described from the Jewish Bible is the notion of, in the beginning was God created the heavens and the earth. And the way he tells this little narrative that Hashem, in this great omnipotent, omniscience, wild energy was lonely. He wanted somebody to talk to beside the angels or whatever. So he created a playground. And that's somehow how people describe the uh, Garden of Eden. And if there hadn't been the fall, this is why all this stuff I think came later, and human beings imposed what they think God did, to explain why they have pain, why they have to hunt for their food, why, before prehistorically, they couldn't even, again, they're uttering these things, and how are they even communicating it? When you think about that in terms of historical time, it's hard for me, and probably all of us, to fathom the evolution of getting to the point where we are now having a language to at least reasonably talk about it and think we're saying that we understand each other relatively well. And even though that's not going to be perfect, but he said we weren't supposed to be here forever, and we were. And he also quotes this other quote, and maybe it's I haven't looked it up in the Hebrew Bible, but it's something from King Solomon, the Solomon the wise. What did he want? He prayed for the ability to go in and out. Rabbi Pressman, does this ring a bell with you? I might have brought it up one time before with you. I'm not sure. The whole notion was, we can. We're not these bodies, and we're not going to be these bodies forever. And there's an eternal energy, an energy force that we're all part of, and we're going to change form eventually and go back and forth. And some of that the notion of all that has been lost, and we've got stuck thinking that this is our full reality of our consciousness and our egos in these bodies as we exist on Earth right now. And how can we jive that with the idea of mortality? We can't. And since we don't know what comes after with perfect understanding, we're still looking for those answers.
Craig looks like he's got an answer for you.
Can't wait.
I am nothing if not persistent, and I get back to intermarriage and the interesting reference, and I take note of the fact that many of us have spouses. My wife was raised a Catholic, but she converted in Denver, ironically or interestingly, at Beth Joseph, which then merged with BMH in Denver, which is where Nella Silverman also became a Jew. And we know about the story of Ruth, that we accept the righteous convert. But here, right in the Torah, is a mention of don't marry these people because you're going to have children and then they're going to turn against you. And I just don't know what a rabbi does with that. I don't know what Kona Beth Shalom does with intermarriage, because it's kind of let's not talk about it, but we need to talk about it, because and I'm no expert on Israel, there's very little
We have intermarried members.
I just want to clarify a few things. Number one.
Message. Right, so I'm just curious about this Quranic reference to intermarriage and how rabbis handle it, and Jewish people should handle it. Please, Aviva.
I'm going to tell you that I have no answers, and I don't proclaim to. We do have someone on the screen who has a lot of experience with how Judaism has dealt with this. But I want to throw in just a thing that we can throw in at any time. You're reading something that was documented in a particular time in history with the background of that history at its core. So, it's something of a context that, it's not for all time, never marry somebody who's not Jewish. There's none of that exists in our Torah.
I can tell you that Kona Beth Shalom
sounds like it could have come
has benefited from intermarriage, even when the person they married was not Jewish and did not convert. For example, Karen, Morty's wife, who I cannot tell you how much she cooked and opened up her home. Morty was very social, but he didn't do the work. Karen did. uh, she started the women's club at Kona Beshalom Wahhabis, I think they called it. The Wahhabis.
Wachovia.
No,
The
Wachovia.
Wachovis. Thank you, Marilyn. She also did the cookbook, the Kona Beshalom cookbook. I cannot tell you how much work she put in to and helped and contributed. So that's just one example. That's not even somebody who converted. So yeah, and also, you know, I go back a long way. Like Arnie Rabin goes back a long way. A few people here do. I started out in Hilo, where almost everybody was married to a non-Jew, the men, and it was their wives. None of them who converted that I know of. Chinese, Japanese, you know, Iva Goldman. They were the ones who did all the planning and cooking for seders. There was no groups there. This is no abad, no rabbis, just some Jews living, you know, in the woodwork out in the boonies. And you know those days, Arnie, you remember those days, right? You've been a long time. You've been in Hawaii a long time. So I can just tell you that about that's how Hilo got started. And that's before Kona Beth Shalom existed. There was none of that. There was just a few Jews that got together for holidays, uh, and their wives were the ones that did the work. So I'm gonna put my little piece in for them. Ra ra, zibumba,
Arnie has
l'chaim.
something to say. He's not the only Arnie that joins to law study. There's another one who sometimes pops in. But
Yeah.
Arnie, go ahead.
I'm talking to Arnie Rabin because I know he's been around. I don't know.
Right.
When did you come to Hawaii, Arnie?
Actually, it hasn't been that long. It's
Oh,
only
it
been a few
hasn't?
years, but
Oh, oh, okay. I thought you were there a long time. Okay, I take that back. I think I'm thinking of Arnie Rabin.
Arnie Raven, the magician.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah. I think I've got you. I'm sorry. Like I
And
said, I take
he also is married to a non-Jew who did not
correct,
convert.
correct. So that being said,
We should start to wrap
and
it
they
up. But
raised their kids Jewish too. That's an interesting part of it too. Okay, I'm done.
Arnie did have his hand up.
That's okay. Well, I'll try to be quick since I know it's getting here. It's already after 4 o'clock. There has, until quite recently, the 20th century, you could get killed for intermarrying and not converting. It was both sides, both the Jew and the non-Jew could get killed. It was a capital crime to evangelize, for Jews to evangelize among non-Jews. And so, I mean, I think that's a lot of it right there. Also, as far as going back to what we're talking about mysticism, yes, that is part of the Jewish tradition, but in the mainstream, until quite recently, until I'd say the 1960s, it was somewhat suspect. One author said that was because of Shabbatai Zvi back in 6th, 17th century, and how he tried to proclaim himself a messiah for the Jewish people. So mysticism has kind of been looked at a little bit askance, shall we say, in the mainstream of Judaism.
Oh, Danny, you have your hand up.
Yeah. A few things real quick. One, just to reiterate, the stuff about intermarriage here in the Torah and really in subsequent books of the Bible is all about defending a nascent and fragile monotheism against the dominant idol worship and all of that. Secondly, I'm not aware of anywhere where Jews who intermarried or even or apostates being killed by the Jewish community. I don't think that happened. It is true that Christians who converted to Judaism or in the Islamic world too, could very well be put to death, which is why in the Middle Ages you have examples of people traveling from Christians traveling to the Muslim world to convert because the Muslims didn't care about that, etc. So, and thirdly, there's intermarriages and intermarriages. There's so many different variations that,
Right.
and you know, from my point of view as a conservative rabbi, the key thing is, are the children going to be raised Jewish? And often enough, it's a Jewish person marrying someone who's not really committed to any other religion and is willing to go along. And other times, you know, the few times that I've seen where it was a a committed Christian and a somewhat committed Jew, it actually didn't end well, but that's anecdotal. So it's a big issue, and the issue is how is it handled? And I absolutely agree. I can think of several non-Jewish mothers who are the ones who drove the kids to Hebrew school, and one of them even ended up working in our office because she was, wanted to help out the synagogue, and those girls, there were 3 girls, they all turned out to be quite committed Jewishly. So, but that's anecdotal. There's such a spectrum of situations. And the last
Right.
thing I'll say is if an alienated Jew marries an alienated Christian, is that really an intermarriage at all? Because there was no chance for the alienated Jew to bring up his or her children Jewishly anyway. So it's complicated, and we have to take everybody where they are and do our best to help them find their way and hopefully raise another generation of Jews.
And who are
What I
we
do
to
know for
judge?
sure is trying to raise kids both is not a recipe for success generally. And it's been studied
Generally, yeah.
statistically speaking. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's
But also, who are we to judge that?
We're Jews.
Yeah, who are we to judge relationships, people who they marry, what their orientations are, what they, I mean, actually, when it gets right down to it, and I think we have to stick to ourselves and not judge others, because what we were talking about before is your relationship, each individual's relationship with God. It's like that's what I think. I mean, I ask questions and I see things I don't like about Orthodox Jews. How about that? Who am I? Am I supposed to judge? So